The chandeliers of the grand Pearl Hall shimmered like frozen stars above my sister Elena's wedding, casting a dazzling, almost blinding light over the sea of silk gowns and tailored tuxedos. Crystal glasses clinked in rhythmic celebration, the sound sharp and distinct against the soft murmur of practiced laughter and polite conversation. Everything looked expensive. The centerpieces alone probably cost more than my first car. Everything looked perfect. The ice sculptures were melting at precisely the right rate. The string quartet was hitting every note with mechanical precision, and the guest list read like a who's who of the city's elite. Everything looked perfect, that is, except for me. I stood near the back of the grand ballroom, my back pressed against a heavy velvet drape, smoothing invisible wrinkles from my simple navy dress. I had chosen it carefully from a discount rack 3 weeks ago. It was elegant but quiet, designed to deflect attention rather than attract it. My mother had warned me twice during the preparations not to draw attention to myself. "Tonight is about Elena," she had hissed while pinning a hem, not even looking me in the eye. "Don't make a scene, just blend in." Tonight was about Elena, the pride of the family, the successful one, the beautiful one. The one who had married up, securing a union with Hassan Nadam, a man whose family name was etched on skyscrapers and hospital wings across the city. Relatives floated past me like ghosts of insecurities past, offering polite, distracted smiles. They were wealthy, or at least they played the part well, and they moved with the easy confidence of people who have never had to worry about a utility bill or a payroll. "So, what are you doing these days?" Aunt Clara asked, stopping briefly. She was already half distracted, her eyes darting over my shoulder, scanning the room for someone more important, someone worth her time. I recognized the look. It was the look of someone humoring the help. "I run a cleaning company," I replied, keeping my voice steady and neutral. Her eyebrows lifted slightly, a micro-expression of pity mixed with dismissal. "Oh, that's nice," she said, the word hanging in the air like a stale odor. "Nice." The kind of word people use when they don't know what else to say, when they want to end a conversation without being outright rude, but certainly without being interested. She patted my arm gently, a gesture of condolence, as if I had told her I was recovering from a long illness, and glided away toward the bar. Later, as the plates were cleared and the wine flowed more freely, I overheard my father laughing at his table of business acquaintances. He sat at the head table, his posture expansive, commanding the space. He was in his element, surrounded by men in suits who nodded at his every word. "Yes, Elena always had ambition," he said proudly, gesturing toward the head table where Elena sat radiant in ivory. "She knew she was meant for something bigger. She has that vision." One of the men, a portly banker I recognized from old family photos, leaned in. "And your other daughter, the one in the navy dress." My father waved his hand dismissively, a flick of the wrist as if shooing away a fly. He didn't even glance in my direction. He didn't need to. He knew exactly where I was, in the corner where I belonged. "Oh, her, she just cleans houses, keeps herself busy. It's honest work, I suppose." The table chuckled politely, a low, understanding sound. "Just cleans houses." The words sank into my chest like cold stones, heavy and jagged. They didn't know. They didn't know about the 4:00 a.m. mornings when my alarm was a scream in the dark, jarring me awake to scrub floors beside the women I hired, because I couldn't yet afford supervisors. They didn't know about the nights I fell asleep at my kitchen table, my face pressed against spreadsheets and tax law textbooks from free online courses, my eyes burning from exhaustion and the glow of a cheap laptop. They didn't know that Sapphire Domestic Services wasn't just cleaning houses. It was a beast I had built from nothing but grit and sheer desperation. It managed luxury villas where the owners didn't know the difference between marble and granite, corporate offices where deals worth millions were signed over desks I had polished myself, and high-rise apartments across the city where people lived lives I could only dream of. They only knew what sounded small. They only saw the dirt under the fingernails, not the foundation underneath. Across the hall, Elena looked breathtaking. She was a vision in ivory silk, her smile effortless, her posture flawless. She caught my eye and waved lightly, a genuine sisterly gesture. I waved back, forcing my hand to move with enthusiasm I didn't feel. I loved my sister. I truly did. None of this was her fault. She had played the game by the rules our parents set, and she had won. But love doesn't cancel comparison. Love doesn't stop the sting. when you are the negative space in someone else's highlight reel. My mother stood to make a toast, tapping her glass with a silver spoon. The ringing sound cut through the chatter, silencing the room. All eyes turned to her. "We are so proud of our daughter, Alina," she announced warmly, her voice amplified by the microphone. "She has always reached high and chosen wisely. She is the jewel in our crown." Applause filled the room, thunderous and approving. "And of course," she added, almost as an afterthought, lowering the microphone slightly as if I were a footnote in the program. "We are grateful for our other daughter, too. She works hard. She just cleans houses, but work is work." Laughter rippled again, louder this time. It wasn't cruel laughter, not intentionally. It was the laughter of people who felt superior, the comfortable chuckle of the establishment acknowledging the working class. Hate flooded my face, a hot prickle under my skin, but I forced a smile. I painted it on, a mask of acceptance. "Work is work," I repeated silently in my head. "Yes, it is. But dignity is dignity, too." And as the music swelled and the bride and groom rose for their first dance, spinning in a circle of spotlight and adoration, I made a silent promise to myself. One day, they would say my name without shrinking it. One day, no one would dare put the word "just" in front of what I built. The music inside the hall grew louder as the night deepened. Drums, laughter, and the sharp clink of glasses rising in celebration created a cacophony that felt suffocating. I slipped out onto the balcony, needing air. The heavy doors clicked shut behind me, cutting off the noise instantly. The cool breeze brushed against my heated skin, carrying away the sting of my mother's words, or at least numbing them. "She just cleans houses." I stared down at the city lights below, a sprawling grid of gold and white. Every glowing window reminded me of the spaces I had scrubbed. Polished and managed. Places people admired without ever thinking about who made them shine. I had touched every surface of this city, it felt like, yet I remained invisible. "You shouldn't let them talk about you like that." The voice startled me. I hadn't heard the door open. I turned slowly, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Hassan stood a few steps away, jacket unbuttoned, tie loosened slightly, as if even he needed a break from perfection. Up close, he looked less like the confident groom everyone admired, the man on the magazine covers, and more like a man thinking too much. There was a weight in his eyes that the cameras didn't catch. "You're supposed to be inside," I said carefully, wrapping my arms around myself against the chill. "It's your wedding." He gave a faint smile, barely a twitch of the lips. "I know, sometimes the guest of honor is the last person who wants to be there." Silence stretched between us, heavy but not uncomfortable. The city hummed below us. "I didn't realize," he continued, stepping up to the railing beside me, "that your family downplays you." I let out a soft, cynical laugh, the sound swallowed by the wind. "They don't downplay me, they define me, and incorrectly." He turned to look at me, his gaze intense. "And incorrectly," he repeated firmly. His tone caught my attention. It wasn't pity, it was knowing. "What do you mean?" I asked, narrowing my eyes. Hassan stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You are the founder of Sapphire Domestic Services, aren't you?" My heart skipped a beat, then two. The air in my lungs froze. "Yes," I replied slowly, my voice tight. "Why?" He studied my face as if confirming something important, checking a mental box he had prepared. "My company signed a multi-year facilities management contract with Sapphire last month for the flagship towers." For a moment, I thought I misheard him. The wind seemed to stop. "Your company," I whispered. "Hassan Nadim Developments," he clarified gently. "We own 3 commercial towers downtown, 2 hotels, and several residential projects. Sapphire handles maintenance and cleaning operations. It was a substantial contract." The city lights blurred for a second as my mind raced. "You're telling me," I said carefully, piecing the puzzle together in real time, "that my company services your properties." "Yes, and you knew I was the owner," he nodded. "I always research the leadership behind companies I partner with. It's a rule of mine. When I saw your name on the initial proposal, I was impressed. Your growth metrics are aggressive, very impressive." Impressed. No one at that wedding had used that word about me. Not once, not ever. "My parents don't know," I murmured, looking back toward the glowing windows of the hall. "I assumed they did," he said, a note of surprise in his voice. "I shook your father's hand tonight. He introduced me to the cleaning daughter. It didn't add up with the CEO I read about." I shook my head slowly. "He didn't read the proposal. He didn't ask." He exhaled slowly, a sound of realization. "That explains a lot." We stood in silence again, but this time it felt charged, dangerous. A current of professional respect and something else, something unspoken, flowed between us. "You're marrying my sister," I reminded him, needing to anchor the moment to remind myself of the boundaries. "Yes," he said quietly. There was something unfinished in his voice, something neither of us dared explore. "I built my business from nothing," I said finally, turning to face the city again. "Not to prove anything to them, just to survive, to pay rent, to eat." "And you built something powerful," he replied, his voice low. "Don't let them erase that." Inside, the crowd cheered as Elena tossed her bouquet into a sea of eager hands. Outside, under the night sky, the groom looked at me not like I was just anything. For the first time that evening, I didn't feel small. I felt seen. I felt validated by the only person in that room whose opinion actually moved the needle in the real world. And that was enough. For a few minutes, it was enough. The morning after the wedding felt heavier than the night before. The celebration continued with a formal brunch, polished tables, soft violin music, and carefully arranged smiles. The aftermath of the party clung to the air, a mix of stale perfume and coffee. Important guests remained in attendance. Business partners, extended relatives, people whose opinions my parents valued more than truth, more than their own daughter. I arrived early. But this time, I did not dress to blend in. I did not choose the navy dress from the discount rack. I wore a tailored white suit, sharp lines, structured shoulders, confidence stitched into every seam. It was a statement piece, bold and unmissable. My heels clicked against the marble floor with steady purpose, a staccato rhythm that announced my arrival before I even entered the room. Conversations paused as I passed. The rustle of silk stopped. Some guests looked confused, trying to place this new, assertive woman. Others looked curious, sensing a shift in the atmosphere. My mother approached me immediately, her eyes widening when she saw me. Her voice was tight, a thin wire of control. "Why are you dressed like that?" "Like what?" I asked calmly, meeting her gaze without flinching. "Like you're presenting something. This is a brunch, not a board meeting." "Maybe I am," I said softly. Her lips pressed into a thin line, turning white. She wanted to argue, but the crowd was watching, so she stepped back, her eyes narrowing. At the front of the hall stood a large projector screen prepared for a sentimental slideshow. Elena had organized childhood photos, engagement pictures, carefully curated memories designed to elicit oohs and ahs. But before the program began, before the nostalgia could start, Hassan rose from his seat and walked toward the microphone. A murmur moved through the room. This wasn't on the itinerary. Elena looked up, surprised but smiling politely, assuming it was another romantic gesture, another declaration of love. Hassan gestured toward the technician in the back. Instead of childhood photos, a sleek corporate logo appeared on the giant screen. Sapphire Domestic Services. The logo was elegant, a deep blue gemstone. A ripple of confusion spread through the crowd. Guests turned to one another, whispering, "What is this? Is this an ad?" "As many of you know," Hassan continued, his voice booming through the speakers, commanding the room instantly. "Hassan Nadam Developments has recently expanded its portfolio. We take our operational efficiency and property management success very seriously. These things are the backbone of our business." He clicked a remote. Charts replaced the logo, growth statistics, performance metrics, testimonials from luxury clients. Photos of pristine hotel lobbies and gleaming office towers flashed across the screen. "Our success," he said, "is due to a strategic partnership with a company that sets the gold standard in this city." My father leaned forward in his chair, his coffee forgotten. He was a businessman. He recognized the numbers on the screen. They were impressive. "The founder and CEO of that company," Hassan said clearly, his voice dropping a decibel to add weight, "is someone in this room." Silence thickened. The room held its breath. He turned toward me, his arm extending in my direction. "This remarkable woman, please stand up." Every head followed his gaze. The spotlight of attention shifted, physically heavy as it landed on me. I walked forward slowly, aware of the weight of every step, the sound of my heels the only noise in the cavernous hall. My heart pounded against my ribs like a trapped bird, but my spine remained straight. I felt the eyes of everyone, the judgment, the confusion. Hassan offered me the microphone. I took it. The metal was cold in my hand. I looked out at the sea of faces. The aunt who had pitied me, the father who had dismissed me, the mother who had shushed me. "I started cleaning houses," I said into the microphone. My voice did not shake, it was clear and steady. Because we needed money, because I had to keep the lights on, because no job is beneath dignity. The room was utterly silent. You could hear the violins tuning in the corner stop. Yes, I continued, meeting my parents' stunned expressions. I clean houses, I clean offices, I clean luxury hotels and corporate towers. I paused, letting the words sink in. I looked at the screen behind me, at the empire represented by those charts. I also built a company that employs over a dozen women, women who were told they were just something too, women who are now managers, supervisors, and business owners themselves. A pause. I am not just a cleaner. I am a business owner, and I am proud of what I do. A quiet clap began from one of the business guests, an older man in a gray suit who had been studying the charts. Then another. Then many. Applause filled the hall, not polite this time, not dismissive. It was genuine. It was the sound of respect. My mother's eyes glistened, though I couldn't tell if it was pride or shame. My father sat frozen, his hand hovering over his coffee cup. Elena's smile had faded into something complicated, shock, confusion, maybe even betrayal. But this wasn't revenge through cruelty. This wasn't about hurting them. This was revelation. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't standing in anyone's shadow. I was standing in my own light. The applause didn't fade quickly. It lingered in the air, thick and undeniable. It washed over the room, changing the atmosphere from one of polite social posturing to genuine acknowledgement. I stepped back from the microphone, but something had already shifted. The invisible wall between me and them had crumbled. The same relatives who had laughed the night before now looked at me differently. They weren't seeing a charity case anymore. They were seeing a power player. They were curious, impressed, calculating. Businessmen whispered to one another, pulling out phones to Google my company. A few even nodded in approval, raising their glasses in a silent toast. My parents looked stunned. They were statues in a garden of movement. My mother approached me first when the crowd began to disperse toward the buffet. Her steps were hesitant, unlike her usual brisk stride. "Why didn't you tell us?" she asked, her voice trembling, not with anger but with something closer to regret. It was the voice of a woman realizing she had missed the most important chapter of a book she thought she had written. I held her gaze. "I tried," I said simply. "You never asked." "You assumed." The words weren't sharp. They didn't need to be. The truth was sharp enough. My father joined us. His usual confidence, the booming authority he carried like a shield, was replaced by a deep, uncomfortable silence. He looked from the screen to me, then back to the screen, doing the math in his head. "We thought it was small work," he admitted quietly, his voice rough. "We didn't understand." "You didn't try to understand," I corrected gently. "There's a difference. You saw a mop and bucket. You didn't see the contracts, the logistics, the branding. You didn't see the value." Across the hall, Elena stood near Hassan. She looked beautiful as always, but something in her expression had changed. The effortless certainty she always carried was cracked. She was the golden child, but the golden child had just been upstaged, not by rebellion, but by reality. Later, she found me alone near the dessert table. She didn't hug me. She stood with her arms crossed, a defensive posture. "Did you plan this?" she asked, her voice tight, brittle. "No," I said honestly. I didn't plan to be hidden either. Hassan recognized the name. Her eyes flickered with emotion, jealousy, sadness, confusion. "You could have told me. I thought you knew." "Would it have changed anything?" I asked. "Would you have introduced me as the CEO last night, or would you have still been afraid I'd embarrass you?" Silence stretched between us, heavy with years of comparison neither of us created, but both of us lived under. "This was my day," she whispered, a tear finally escaping. "I never wanted to take that from you," I replied softly. "I just stopped shrinking. I just stopped letting you define the size of my life." Her expression softened slightly, not fully understanding, but beginning to. She nodded, wiped her eye, and walked away. It wasn't a fix, it was a start. Over the following weeks, things changed. The dynamic in the family shifted like tectonic plates. Relatives who once pitied me now asked for business cards. Invitations to networking events appeared in my mail, ones where my father was usually the guest of honor. My phone rang with partnership inquiries. The same people who had used the word just now used words like visionary and impressive. It was almost ironic. They didn't value the work, they valued the revenue. They didn't value the sweat, they valued the status. But that was okay. I didn't need them to understand the struggle. I just needed them to see the result. The sweetest part of the revenge wasn't the recognition. It wasn't the applause or the shocked faces. It was the freedom. It was walking into a room and knowing I belonged there, not because of who I married or who my parents were, but because of what I had built with my own two hands. 1 month later, I sat in my office overlooking the city skyline. It was a corner office in one of Hassan's towers, actually. Rent was included in the contract. Contracts for expansion into 2 new cities lay open on my desk. Sapphire Domestic Services was growing faster than I had imagined, branching into facility management and concierge services. Hassan sat across from me, not as my sister's groom, not as a family member, but as a business partner. We were reviewing the quarterly projections. "You changed the narrative," he said quietly, leaning back in the leather chair. "No," I replied, signing the final page of the contract with a flourish. The ink was black and permanent. "I stopped letting others write it. I took the pen back." Outside the window, the city gleamed. Towers of glass and steel reflected the sun. My company maintained those spaces. My team cared for them. They were the proof of every early morning, every tear swallowed in silence, every just I had ever ignored. My parents eventually began introducing me differently. It took time. Pride is a hard thing to swallow. But now, when they introduced me at parties, they said, "This is our daughter. She built a company." No shrinking. And that was the real victory, because sweet revenge isn't loud. It isn't cruel. It is standing tall in the same room where you were once made small and realizing you no longer need anyone's permission to shine. If this story gave you chills, if you believe that hard work and dignity are the ultimate comebacks, smash that like button and tell us in the comments. Have you ever been underestimated by the people closest to you? How did you prove them wrong? And of course, subscribe for more stories like this, where the underdog takes the lead and the truth finally gets its turn at the microphone. I'll see you in the next video.